I'm going to talk about a subject that I don't feel is discussed at all, if at all, anywhere. And I think it's very important, especially for those kids or adults, kids that have turned into adults of dysfunctional, toxic, narcissistic, karmic family dynamics. And if you are from one of those families, you may hit a point in your awakening, your healing journey, your conscious awakening, that you may have to make a decision that is not easy at all. And it's the decision to have to separate yourself from your dysfunctionally toxic family. And the reason that I say I'd like to talk about this today is because I had some downloads today about this when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to speak on next. And the thing that came to me was the fact of it was so hard when I had to make that decision. And even though I was, coming from a non-supportive family, and I knew I had put all my effort in, 15 years of trying to see if they would help me in my healing journey. Because if you listen to my timeline, I've been trying to do this journey for about 27 years. And 15 of those years, I allowed myself to be held back because of patterns, basically, right? And people pleasing. I was trying to please my mother and my father. And as a sensitive and an empath and an intuitive people pleaser, somebody that grew up in survival mode and in fear, you'll tend to do that, right? That's something you'll do. And I've talked to a lot of people on the side of, the people that end up leaving or have to leave. At this point, I have. But during the time period that I was actually doing my separation, or where I took it was almost a total of 10 years that I took to separate in order to heal. And if you've heard the timeline, there was a lot of obstacles that got in the way. That's why it ended up taking so long. However, I had to separate myself so much that I got to a point where my family didn't even know where I was. They didn't even know if I was alive. Yet, during this time period, my mother and my father were making up false narratives about me and spreading these around. Little did I know that this had actually been happening all my life. And that is why, and that was the thing my intuition was feeling back then when I had to step away and say, I need to do something different, because me trying to heal with my family around, I was getting nowhere. It was like running in place and being pushed backwards at the same time. So I had to make a really tough decision. And you would think, why, it's not tough. Like if they're being, rude and bullying you and this and that, why is that hard? Well, when that's all you've known and what you've grown up in, it's still hard. If you have a family and you understand what I'm saying, you get this. It's like, that's all you have. That's all you know. And, maybe those days that you really could use somebody for a hug, you would take it, if you could even get even a slight hug, or hey, even if she just wants to gossip about the neighbors today, I'd rather have that, right? And just to have somebody, help you feel better. Because the healing process, you're just releasing so much trauma and so much, so much old programming and patterning, and it's exhausting, and it's a much easier journey if you could have somebody to do it with, even if they are dysfunctional, toxic narcissists. Now, I didn't, I knew that my parents had had traumas, turned into, some slight, mental illness. And that was part of the reason I started the journey and knew I needed to be on this journey to heal, because I didn't want to see myself go down the same road that they were going down, my mom and my dad. I didn't want to become codependent and, have to stay with somebody just because I did not think that I would be able to not live on my own. Like, what would I do for money? That scared me to think, oh my God, I can't imagine being that codependent upon somebody where I feel like I have to stay with them because I don't think I could make enough money to help myself. I was like, And then on my dad's side, I was like, I don't want to be that angry person my whole life, or at any point, that angry, abusive person. And so, that hates his job and, yells at his kids and kicks his dogs. And, I did not want to be any of that. So the whole purpose of the healing journey was to make sure that, the generational traumas and curses were broke. So it was intended to help me, and then in turn, bring any of that help back home to the family when that could have been an option, and if that could have been an option. If not, I wanted to be able to at least coexist with them in a way that I say, I don't care what you think about me, finally, for the first time in life, and I will accept you for who you are too, whether or not you want to accept me for who I am. And I knew that I remember thinking when I, was considering even trying to separate, because I had a couple of times previous to the 10 years of separation. I had first done a 1-year separation and then a 3-year. And in each instance, they still had communication with me and could reach me. The one that I took the 3 years, I just chose not to communicate with them. But they also played that card back at me, as, children will do and narcissistic kids will do, right? And that's what this boils down to, right? Is the fact that you're dealing with adults with unresolved childhood trauma, and probably pretty severe. Well, definitely I know exactly what was occurring on my dad's side of the family. And still to this day, the other side, my mom's side, keeps it pretty hush-hush. I know that there was verbal and physical, but beyond that, I can't confirm. So, I obviously had empathy for them, but they were hurting me. Bottom line is, they weren't letting me be me. They were hurting me. And so to me, I had to move away to basically stop being bullied from my own family and stomped on. What had happened during that time period is I remember also thinking, why does it feel like I'm telling them what I'm doing? And because my mom and dad don't approve of what I'm doing, they're starting a different narrative. And all of a sudden there's what's that? It's the telephone game where somebody tells somebody something and then the story turns and now somebody else tells somebody something and the story's a different story and so on, right? I kind of knew something like that was happening, but in no way when I first started this 10 years did I ever think that my mom, my own mother and father were purposely telling lies about their oldest daughter. In no way. You couldn't have paid me enough to think that could have been true back then. Go ahead 10 years from that point. I find out, that this was happening, not only within the family, but that my mom and dad were creating triangulation between my brother and my sister and I. And that all the family members knew a completely different story other than what the reality of it was that I was going through. And not even going through, just what my life was, because I wasn't going through anything. I, again, just wasn't doing what they wanted me to do. This was about the time that I quit my corporate job and stopped working for the company where I could get my insurance benefits and this and that and decided I wanted to go into holistic health and healing. And when I started my massage therapy certificate, they did not take this seriously. They didn't even tell anybody, apparently. But what they did start telling people was a complete different lie. That I was, instead of saying that I was, trying to veer my life into a different career, they said that I was just falling off and hard drug addict and who knows this and that. Basically anything that was not happening. So the reason I'd like to speak about this today is because at that time period, like I had mentioned, I did decide to make that final, this needs to happen until I can become stronger. But again, in no way is that a decision that comes easy for anybody. And this is speaking on the side of it, on the side of the kids growing up within the family, on this side of it. The reason that I speak on this is because I've recently been speaking to mothers that are the narcissists, that are dealing with their own children, cutting them off, and watching the universe show me how this one particular mother is completely putting all this projection onto her daughter. And I was watching the narcissist not take accountability and just letting them basically let their children go. And waiting for the next person to give them a, oh, don't worry, she's just being a jerk. That's what the mom wants to have her friends and her family members tell her is that she's just being a jerk because they're only getting the narcissistic mother's version of what's happening. And when I was watching this, I'm like, wow, this must be what my mother has been doing and my father were doing about me to other people. And they all just played right along with it. So the thing I'd like to tell those narcissistic parents, if any of them are ever drawn to this video, is that if you truly, truly want to have a relationship with your child again, you need to be the adult. You need to be the bigger person. You need to actually act like you made that child, brought that child into this world. We're connected by the umbilical cord. This is the way that you assisted your child with feeding. And now you're just easily going to throw your child away because they won't talk to you. When a child is not talking to a parent, it's not because they don't want to. We all want to. But you're not allowing us to talk to you. If we want to talk to you and you repel us, well, what other option is there except to say, fine, I'll step away, take myself out of this equation. And the thing is I'm always somebody that wants to get to the root of a problem. And a narcissist is the way that they are because they refuse to get to the root of their own problems. So they are not going to take the time to get to the root of another person's problem. It doesn't matter if you're the daughter, the son, the husband, it doesn't matter who you are at all. The only person that matters to a narcissist is number one. The thing that I heard this mother say was, I could care less what happens to my daughter. She was just like, I I just want, to be able to see my grandson. So much wrong with that, like, it's like, how does that make you feel better about the situation, really? I doubt that if do you see how that's not going to work? Because if you don't mend things with your daughter, how is your daughter going to feel comfortable with you having a relationship with her son? And this is one of the reasons I am so happy I made that decision 27 years ago to have the abortion that I did, because my child then would have been caught in a mess like that potentially. And now that I see what has occurred within my family and the chaotic tornado mess that's going on because of my mom right now, and how she has no relationship with the nieces and nephews, my nieces and nephews, except for on one side, but it's very, very unhealthy, very toxic. And, it's pretty irresponsible of my brother and my sister to even allow access for their kids by my mother. It's like that. And so I am just wanting to speak on this because I cried in the beginning stages of this separation every day to my therapist. I cried every day about it. Like, it made me so sad, even though I knew I had to. And even though there was something that was like, and every time I'd think about it, I'm like, God, maybe I should reach out. Maybe I should reach out. Maybe it's time, or maybe I have to right now. And something inside me was like, nope, don't you do it. Don't you do it. Now I know why. I mean, I literally, my higher self literally guided me away from them with intention, knowing that they have been siphoning my energy my whole life, trying to steal, trying to do a destiny swap. This would make sense because I'd always hear rumors about my mom dyeing her hair red when I was not around. But the minute I would step back into the area, she would dye her hair back to her typical bleach blonde hair. And I'm always like, why don't you keep your hair red? Blah, 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 blah. She'd get all weird about it. And it was like, what? But that's what that was about. Destiny swap. She was trying to be me. When you think about it, like for me, when I think about it like that, I'm like, my mom was trying to be me, but yet trying to tell other people that I am this shitty asshole of a person. But this is why I had to go through the narcissistic abuse that I did in the relationship to have an understanding of what a narcissist is. And then, grieve that at that point, because the universe knew if I could have some prep work before I had to experience this betrayal within my family, that I would have a better chance of surviving that mind-shattering moment, that I came to that realization, like, oh my God, the universe guided me correctly. I did it all right. I stayed awake properly. And, like I mentioned before, in my 10 years of healing, I get there to start my healing. And then the first 3 years are sidetracked due to that con man and the gang stalking. And then it takes me another 2 years to heal from that. So I have 5 years of this 10-year time period that I literally had no time to heal the childhood stuff yet. The whole reason I went away. So I had 5 years where, at that point I was like, oh my God, like, I know my dad has got to be not doing good. And oh my God, like, I can feel like the time is ticking. I could feel it intuitively. Like, things weren't going good for him. I could just feel it. And I find out my feelings were right. And I was like, but I'm no further ahead 5 years into this than I was when I first left. So if I'm going to do this, I have to do this. And I'm somebody that once I put my mind to something, that's what's happening. So finally, once I got past the initial trauma healing from the gang stalkers and the con man, now I could finally start my childhood healing in year 6. And then I had a good year of that before I get physically sick. And then, and then it was hard because there was a lot of the time I had to put focus onto the physical stuff. And, it took away from my mental and emotional healing. So the universe was like, it was almost like the universe was intentionally trying to keep me away and trying to have me see what I saw recently. Maybe in a way where the universe was trying to avoid me having to come back and have such a tower moment, dark night of the soul, shattering moment, once I saw who my family truly was. 21:11 on the clock confirmation. So I wanted to talk about this because when I was the person that had started working with other healers and people that were awakening, nobody else had a story about having to separate themselves from their family. Not one. I felt like a freak, to be honest. Like, I felt like so out of place. Like, why, I just felt like people were judging me. And obviously that was an insecurity I had to get through. But, I'm like, why is nobody else dealing with this? Like, they all are just doing their stuff, and and like, why doesn't anybody else have to separate? I guess it's the same reason that I, always ask the question, like, why does nobody else fear their father until the age of 40, huh? Why is that not a common theme? So, yeah, I get to a point though where, I'm asking this question and nobody else has the same answer. There was even a point where before I started the journey and I had a year of not talking to my parents before I left the state I was in with my the guy that I dated for 10 years on and off that had dealt with manic bipolar, and had manic issues on and off. He said to me, because he knew my family, and he even said to me, you really should reunite with your family because family's important. This is an example of somebody that knew me for 10 years. But see, he also he also was not addressing his traumas. So, of course, he's not going to see trauma in other people because that would mean he'd have to see it in himself, which is, again, that's the main reason why we are not together anymore. But that always bothered me because I was like, how rude and how mean they are. Like, why would you even say this? Like, they're not like your parents. If they were anything like your parents, I mean, I wish they were as loving and as supportive as your parents, but not all parents are. And, at that time, I, again, was the only person I knew that had this situation occurring. And it really isolates you. It makes you feel very isolated, right? And I guess I just wanted to put a video out there to start this conversation to let people know that if you are a person, a being who has been raised in a dysfunctionally toxic, narcissistic karmic family, yes, this would be the reality that you most likely are going to have to face. Honestly, I'm going to say 100%. Knowing narcissists, because a narcissist is a narcissist for a reason. They don't want to fix their traumas. They don't want to heal. It's all about them. They want to project their issues onto you, project false narratives onto you that are in reality. And that's the thing, is all the stories they're telling about you are really about them. So, but I didn't know all this back then. And it was like the universe was trying to provide me with this information, and I was so unawakened to it. So unawakened to it. If I might get emotional a little bit here because this was this haunted me throughout my whole healing. And I missed them so much throughout it all. All I kept thinking about was, I cannot wait to get back home. I got to a point after I, got through forgiveness and forgave my mom and dad for how horrible they treated me and how, abusive they were. I got to a point where I, was like, I cannot wait. Like when I just want to go home when I go home, like, especially after everything I had been through, it was like, I want to know I can feel safe again. And like I mentioned in the video, I speak about this part of my timeline about when I got to that point, I got to experience 2 weeks. That was it. 2 weeks of this dream family that I think I had envisioned and dreamt of and just manifested in my mind. But little did I know that this family never existed my whole life. Everybody else probably saw this all around me. But again, I was not allowed to question things or second guess things because otherwise I got physically abused or verbally abused or emotionally abused. So you start setting up walls, but if somebody has to do this, what that means is there is something that is not being attended to. That means that there's a disrespect occurring on behalf of the parents' part to the child or the adult child, wherever they are. This means that there's bullying, manipulation, triangulation, false narratives, mind control. And just like, just no boundaries at all. And when you get older, and it took me a long time to finally gain the guts to do what I did. That took guts to separate myself. That was actually me saying, why can't you help me? And if you can't help me, then I'm going to separate myself from you so that when I am, so that I can actually heal. Do I want to do this without you, even though you suck? No, I would rather you suck and be around me. But if I had any understanding about what a narcissist is, and that all narcissists have the ability to change, but most will not because they're lazy. And this kind of a journey is not a lazy man's journey. I remember being so upset by this. And I remember thinking, after a couple of years, I had run across a couple of people who were also dealing with very toxic, dysfunctional families. And, here I'm giving advice on, how to do what I did and, that it's, and being honest and saying that it's not an easy thing to do. Because you have to get to a point that if you celebrated holidays with them, that you learn to not celebrate holidays and such. Which is a good thing overall. But since they're just a 3D marketing ploy, and a way to try to siphon energy from, us. So I wanted to just, like I mentioned, get on and speak about this and start a conversation to let people know that if you have to separate from your family, that's okay. In fact, you have to do it. Because that's the thing is I look back on this and there's no way I would be anywhere near as far into my healing and awakening journey if I had not left them. I would still be back in my same old patterns, same old addictions, same old codependencies, and worst of all, a narcissist in training. Yes, and I will speak on another video about the fact that I did have a realization that, I mean, if you're being raised by narcissists, of course you're going to learn how to be a narcissist, right? And that was hard for me to soak in that information, being an empath and a highly sensitive, because to me, that is two opposite sides of the spectrum. But that's why living that way never felt right to me. Living the narcissistic way never felt natural. I felt like I was very empty. I felt soulless. In fact, I remember one day when I was a corporate meeting and events planner and I stood up in my cubicle and I yelled, "This company is taking my soul." And, it was one of those moments that I wish I would have left, but it took me 4 years to leave the company because, again, I was appeasing my dad of being in a company where I'm making insurance and getting this and getting my 401k and, like watching the news and I just wanted to see if I could, like I mentioned, start a conversation about this to, again, let people know that for some of us, you have to do that. Otherwise, you're going to keep getting pulled back in by them, because that was the thing that I needed to do up until I realized what I found out recently about how crazy dysfunctionally toxic my whole family truly is. I was still energetically attached to them. And even though I had healed, but still in healing because that was 40 years of trauma, and like a lot of childhood trauma. And you can't just, get through that in a year. That takes a minute to release when you're in survival mode and your cortisol levels are up 100% every day for 40 years. You know what I mean? Like, it's not an overnight fix. So, but because of that, my whole thoughts were, once I heal, I can get back to them. But I would hesitate on doing things. If I was still in communication with them, there's no way I'd be communicating about any of this stuff right now, because I'd be so concerned about hurting their feelings. And at this point, it's all about the truth, because that's all it's ever been for me, is finding the truth, speaking the truth, being truth. And now I understand why it's so embedded in my cellular level of why I am the generational trauma breaker, is because none of them wanted to do it. They're all very deep into this narcissistic karmic space of unhealed, just very, very toxic. They're so blind, the fact that they want to all turn against their own family member. And this is the thing is I saw this happening my whole life. Family members fighting against other family members over land and money. Like, very serious, where they wouldn't talk for long periods of time, getting physical. Since I was a little girl, I remember my uncle punching my dad in the face. Ripping his shirt off of his back at Christmas. That was Christmas. I was 5 years old. And it happened right in front of me. And, it was just one of those things where it's like, this is looking back, I'm like, I literally grew up in a narcissistic family. All we had to do was put a comedy spin to it. Now we got, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Or, what's the other good narcissistic family comedy? I'm totally blanking, but it's an even better representation. I mean, they're both great. But anyways, I'll think of it here. But yeah, so just even, I remember when one of my aunts, went into bankruptcy because she was having a gambling issue. And, I told my mom, I'm like, Mom, if she's doing that, that means there's a deeper problem. You're her sister. Go to her. See what the problem is and try to help her work through that. Oh, no. Oh, no. No, 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 no. And this is why they are freaked out by me, is because I speak the truth. They just, instead of talking truth, they gossip about other people. And as we know, tell lies about other people. And I never thought I would be the brunt of any of their attacks. But I mean, I guess I watched them all do this to my sister before I had found out she was molested by my uncle. And when she was acting out, I mean, to see them turn on people, even after my grandparents died, I watched my mom I heard about my mom and all of her sisters attacking, suing, I should say. I shouldn't say attacking because I'm not aware that they physically attacked, but they sued my cousin, their nephew, because my grandma and grandpa, their parents, gave him the farm. Great. Congratulations to my cousin, you know? He deserves it. He worked that farm his whole life as well. But obviously they did this for a reason. They knew something. It was, that's 5 girls that didn't get any part of that. And it was because my grandpa wanted to keep the farm in the family and not have it sold off because they all were so greedy and just wanted to see money. But this is how the whole thing was. We had a lakeshore property that my grandparents did that myself and my mom and my dad and my brother and my sister all pretty much grew up on in the summers and on the weekends, especially when we were young. And I mean, it was a beautiful property where that would have been a great piece of property to pass down throughout the generations. Gave it to the girls, and before it was like hyenas. Let's get it sold. We just got to get the most money. Okay, I need you all to know this is a message of kindness and information. The reason I get so animated, the reason I speak about it in the way that I do is because if I say so, if I would have been able to know, first of all, what narcissist is, and then when I speak about these stories are supposed to help connect moments. They were my moments. I was able to connect to go, oh, that was a narcissistic moment. Like another weird one, and this maybe goes to the incest. Like they would all go, when we were really little, they would all go skinny dipping together, like in the lake. The relatives, and then that was something I thought about today, and I was like, oh, the incest, So, yeah. Just saying that not all of us have the perfect family that supports us. If a person has to separate from their family, that means there's something serious happening. That means because no child ever wants that. Ever. That's the last case scenario. That's plan double Z, And that's why I feel it's my job to help inform people about the fact of what narcissists are, what they look like, what they sound like, how they act, so that you can identify that for yourself and know, is this person ever going to help me? Because that's the bottom line is, I had to rationalize that this is what's been happening my whole life, and this is what will continue if I choose to allow them to have access to me and my physical and my energetic self. And I had to cut it off. And that's why the universe sent me back home to see what I experienced with the whole family and watch them just explode like a ticking time bomb. And, watch them not support their own blood, who never did anything to any of them except love them and send them love at all times. So if somebody has to get to that point, there's a reason. Now that part is said, speaking to the narcissistic parents, if you truly want to have a relationship, if it's at all salvageable with your son or daughter who has separated themselves from you, then you need to be ready to get to the root of that problem. You need to have a conversation, stop being a little baby, stop being a child, and you need to go to that son or daughter and ask them, what is going on? What is at the root of this? I am open to hearing, and you have to go in without any type of sass. You need to go in with only open ears and no defensiveness and no competition and no jealousy. You need to come in with loving openness, period. And show true ability to want to mend whatever is occurring. At that point, then and only then will that child be able to make an educated decision if you are trying to be serious or not. But you not trying only makes it worse. But like I was mentioning before, the whole reason a narcissist stays a narcissist in that way, in the unhealed way, is because they don't want to do the work. They know it's a lot of fucking work. They know they have to go back into things that they don't want to go into, and they choose not to. That's their choice. That's their problem, their issues, their traumas. What they're doing when you're still attached to them is they are just projecting their issues, their traumas onto you. Their false narratives are their projections of what they are doing and what they don't like in themselves onto the person who's trying to be the love that they wish they could be. So 41, 44 on the clock, that's a confirmation. And I just wanted to say that if anybody has had any experience with having to separate from your family, your parents, whoever is somebody that you go to for support, if you could type 999 in the comments, I would be curious to know how many have had to make this decision, because for the longest time, I thought it was a super anomaly. And then once my healing really got rocking and rolling, I started to see the empathy, then people understanding and giving me that support, like, well, if you have to do it, it's okay. You know, it is what it is. And, you know, getting more and more confirmation about that. But I'm still not seeing a lot of information, at least on YouTube right now, on it. And I feel like this is a subject that people aren't talking about, and we should be starting conversations about this more. So if this resonates for you and you can, you know, if you've had to deal with this, please type 999 in the comments. Thank you so much for listening. I'm sending my love and gratitude.